Okay, welcome back to the Gex 3D and to the Gecko commentary with me, Skully the Metalhead. Today we are going to be kicking things off a little bit differently because right now we've got a boss battle against MOOSHOO Pork. What the fuck kind of villain name is that? Seriously, MOOSHOO Pork. Well, despite his namesake, if you take one look at this boss, you're in for some pretty freaky shit, man. If you don't know what I mean, well, let's just take a look. What the flying fuck am I looking at? Honestly, I mean, I'm kinda surprised that Crystal Dynamics have never had their hand in making a horror game, but Jesus Christ, this fucking thing is nightmare fuel. Pure nightmare fuel. Like, I mean, you'd think that a cow and pig hybrid would look okay, but fucking hell, man. I mean, if Gex 3D Into the Gecko was given, like, you know, the Crash Bandicoot and Sane trilogy kind of, you know, remake with that level of detail, Christ, so many children would be traumatized by this thing. Anyway, I suppose before this fight ends, I should tell you how it works. Basically, you're supposed to be hitting the switch, which electrocutes MOOSHOO Pork, who will then chase you and try and smack you and probably eat you for dinner if he had the chance. But again, if you're quick and, well, if you bait him out of his little hidey hole and let him run after you, you can pretty much beat him no problem, as was demonstrated right there. And we've killed MOOSHOO Pork. Jesus Christ, that thing is fucking scary, man. Jesus, I mean, I don't fucking know, it's a fucking pig thing. Well, and again, we're going to be getting to our next level in a second, which is pretty interesting to talk about, but since, well, there was so little for me to really cover about MOOSHOO Pork, I think I might divulge into a little tangent about his character, which I honestly have to wonder, because, I mean, not only in Gex 3D Enter the Gecko is he given coverage, but also in Gex 3 with, like, small visual cameos here and there, which has me a little bit curious, to be perfectly honest, because, and again, I was talking a little bit more about story in Gex in the last part, although I didn't really want to elaborate for the sake of it, but I suppose now I possibly can, and I guess the implicit reason why everybody is working for Rez is because he will offer them a share of the media dimension. The thing about that is that I'm not necessarily sure whether or not this is just a bit of my headcanon that I just kind of accepted, or if that's the real reason, because the game doesn't really go out of its way to establish, you know, what Rez is doing outside of taking over the media dimension, or what exactly everybody else is staking it. I mean, yes, the government wants Rez taken out, but for what reason, and for why anybody really cares, I don't know. I mean, yes, I can accept, you know, the excuse that, oh, it's a 90s video game to some degree, but at the same time, though, I mean, you kinda like a little bit more of a story explanation for it. And I mean, as for Rez's character himself, oh, we'll be getting back to him, since there's a surprising amount of detail that's actually been put on his character, but I don't know, like, I mean, like, maybe not expand on the story to, like, to the degree of, you know, like an epic adventure or anything like that, but I'd say just a little bit something more so we have some defining motivations for our villains and everything. Like, I mean, as far as I can tell, like, from a bunch of extended and what I've read on, like, wiki sites and everything, it seems to be that Rez just wants to populate the television airwaves with bad programming, which is surreal and strange, but I don't know, man. Well, that's not about the story, I suppose. Now it's time to get on to the level itself, which in this case is The Umpire Strikes Out. Fantastic level pun, and holy fuck. Outside of the air meter thing, which I'll get into a little bit, this is probably one of my favourite level tropes in the game. And I mean in terms of, like, full levels, not the, you know, brief things that we've seen in the bonus levels. Like, I mean, I don't know, I just love the aesthetics and how it seems to combine a bunch of shit from, like, you know, Star Wars and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty nice. And also just generic aliens, which, according to my headcanon, are the Furons from Destroy All Humans, because the Furon Empire are what characterizes Greys, or the generic alien, for those of you who are not in the know, you know? Yeah, the one gimmick about this level that a lot of people tend to dislike is the whole air meter ordeal, which again I can agree with to some degree. But at the same time, though, air is rather plentiful, and unless, of course, you don't spend your time just standing around like a moron, you should be relatively fine. Although a weird little fun fact that I did notice when you use the invincibility cheat is that the air meter goes away completely, so for those of you who just want to break the game, I suggest using the cheat codes. Which Kinda takes me back to a time when video games actually used to have, you know, feasible cheat codes. Which they don't do anymore because, you know, they can charge you more for DLC and, you know, add-on packs and content and all that kind of shit, but I don't know, it was... I mean, I suppose with games like, you know, Grand Theft Auto and shit, especially when, you know, one of the best parts of the game was just to mess around with the cheat codes and just play as an overpowered badass and everything, and I don't know, it's an era of gaming that I kind of miss. But then again, you know, gotta get that extra couple of dollary dues because the money and the video game market and it's too expensive for Midway publishers, which is why companies like THQ and Midway are pretty much gone nowadays. Which kind of makes me depressed, to be perfectly honest, because it just kind of shows that, you know, unless of course you're going at it with an indie title with like a $0 budget, or, you know, you're a big AAA publisher that's too afraid to you know, innovate with new ideas like a lot of developers did in the 90s, you're pretty much going to sink and fall flat on your ass. I suppose that's probably why I keep on going back to a lot of late 90s, early 2000s era video games, because, you know, it was a time in which, you know, 3D was the hot new shit, and they could basically do a lot more than they could with, you know, 2D games on the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, but at the same time, you know, there was just so much creativity going around, which, you know, even if all the games weren't necessarily that stellar or aged that well, at the very least there was an era of, okay, let's try something new, let's take a look at this, and that's fantastic. I don't know, I mean, I don't want to be wistful, you know, nostalgia and saying, oh, there's no good games ever, because, you know, there obviously is, I mean, especially with, you know, this current generation and everything, but I don't know, there was just a sense of gleeful fun and optimism that I think kind of came with the 90s, and I don't know, it was something that just didn't really characterize itself as being a little bit better and a little bit prettier, which I guess the only kind of way I'd ever feel that way again is if, you know, VR gets to, you know, Matrix or Sword Art Online levels of, you know, video game immersion, but I don't know, as it stands right now, just not a lot to really get me excited. Well, that actually went on for quite a long time. But anyway, I'd say in terms of length, this... well, there's two, space-themed levels, and I'd say this is probably the longest out of the two, if only because of the diverging pathways. Well, I suppose also the fact that I went out of the way to get to that silver remote also played a part in it a little bit, but, you know, these are pretty sparse, expansive levels, and I'd say, well, in terms of realistically designing, you know, the levels from an artistry standpoint, I'd say it kind of makes sense for this to be sparse more so than the fine-tuning levels that we played right back at the beginning. But anyway, we have a remote, now that we made it to the space station. And Bob's your uncle, I guess. Ah, delicious. Both silver remotes, actually, that's fantastic. Loading the Midea dimension. Let's see, where did I leave my fucking handy-dandy telecommunication device? It seems to have vanished right now, so I have no backup tangents. Unless, of course, I look around for them a little bit more. Let's... oh dear. Oh dear, 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 I've completely lost it. I will have to pause the commentary, but I don't really want to do that. Oh, this next mission is really fun, and I found my telecommunications device. Also, sorry about that brief edit there. Death. Because, you know, we're going to show in a concise run, and I swear I've got the video game skills. Anyway, as I mentioned last time, I did find my telecommunications device, and now I'm not going to run out of tangents, I hope, I think. Personally, though, I think this level is actually a little bit, well, this mission, I should say, is a little bit more fun than the previous one, because instead of just running towards the television, you actually get to ride around on a spaceship. You don't get to fly, but you just get to ride around like a bit of a roller coaster. And then you get to run the Death Star. By that I mean, like, literally run across laser thingies. I don't know, I find it pretty fun. Of course, you just gotta go through this little brief pathway first, but nonetheless. Again, that's kind of what I like about it. It's short, and then you get to the fun, wee action part. And let's go for a ride. Yeah, I know it probably doesn't really look that impressive now. But I don't know, if you get a nice little Star Wars theme, you get some lasers in the background, and I'm sure on modern generation consoles this scene would probably look amazing, with shiny things dangling in front of your face. But then, of course, we crush our spaceship. Space chip. And now we have to escape from the lasers. Damn. Seriously, look at it, it's so fun. And it's actually easier to dodge those lasers than it might appear, because they are rather slow. Excuse me. And this is a section where you have to kill all enemies before moving on, and holy shit, R2-D2 took a level in badass because he's packing so much heat. Although admittedly, considering the Star Wars prequels, R2-D2 probably would have done something like that anyway, but the less said about the prequels, the better. Yippee-ki-yay, we've got all the remotes, and I will be taking a brief break in a moment because we're coming up to a level that I absolutely despise. Oh dear dear dear, what is this level? Well, if you thought that the first dinosaur level sucked, this one is even suckier. Yes, let's take a break because fuck this level. Oh, dear 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 dear. I have returned from the break after eating my delicious meal of spaghetti bolognese, which was quite lovely. But now, yes, we get into the bullshit, and this level is... I'd argue that this level is probably one of the hardest in the game. Did I turn my volume up too much, or is that how it always was? I'm not necessarily too sure. Nope, it's fine. But yeah, this level is a pain in the ass, whether you're doing it normally or you're going out of your way to get the silver remotes. The worst is yet to come. Fuck, it's as if the fucking volume just got raised significantly. Excuse me. I have just finished eating, and I must find my telecommunication device for some more juicy tangents. Let's see. Bugger. Oh, actually, no, there is something I can talk about, which was another thing that I found on the cutting room floor, alongside that Jezza Rich 98 Faith Hope Unity thing. I believe initially, I'm not sure whether or not this is beta or something that's still in the final game, but when you head to the save feature in which you can access your memory card, there's like a bunch of televisions that project like a bunch of the different PS1 icons of games that you have. Yeah, interesting little fun fact, I believe there was actually a platform similar to the ones that transport you to different sectors of the media dimension that would lead right up to there, and I believe if you walked up to it and stood there for a few seconds, a la Crash Bandicoot 2's Warp Room, you could actually access your save file that way, and there's actually a picture that I might put up right about here, which as you can see has nothing on it outside of the little, you know, colourful code thing. But yeah, this is pretty... I'm guessing that this is probably how you accessed your save thing, and I believe it is still in the final game, but it's only accessible if you use a moon jump code. Which again is pretty interesting to say the least. But I don't know, I guess they just cut it out for the sake of, you know, having an easier way to access your save feature. Which I think Gex 2 handles it pretty well outside of the password system in and of itself, because I mean, you can choose to save each time you complete a level, or I believe if you just choose to exit a level in and of yourself and just save your progress and, I don't know, go off to do other things. I don't know, that's just... The thing about these levels, though, is that, I mean, commentary-wise, there's just not much to really say about them. They're just difficult, and to be perfectly honest, as I briefly touched upon in the last, you know, prehistoric-era mission, they honestly could have been cut, in my opinion, and I honestly think that levels like, you know, in Dragnet or Aztec to Step would have been far superior replacements. And fun fact about the Aztec to Step level, because I was recently rewatching a couple of, you know, E3 and trailers for Gex Enter the Gecko, and there was one which displayed the Aztec to Step level in what appeared to be a little bit more of an expansive and I believe possibly even a full level in and of itself. And again, I can't necessarily confirm this since, you know, I'm just basing this purely off a trailer itself, but from the looks of things, it looked pretty fucking cool, and I'm kind of saddened that, you know, such a thing never actually happened in favor of this trash. I don't know. I don't know, this is not anything to... Oh, that's another enemy that's kind of fucking bullshit. Those fucking pterodactyls that are just like... They're particularly a little bit more annoying in the third tier of the prehistoric channel missions. And now for some reason it's playing the theme that you heard previously with the mysterious Gecko in the cave, where you find the one cutscene in the game. Well, I say one cutscene, but there's actually two more which are related to the Kung Fu theme levels, and I believe just one that's just randomly there. I suppose I can give the music that sounds at least appropriate to the theme, but even then that's not really saying much considering that this level is just boring as batshit. I don't know, I'm sorry, but there's just nothing to say. Any more tangents? Fuck, I don't want to use them all on this fucking piece of shit level. Ugh, Christ. Suppose I could talk about the N64 version of the game, but then again, there's not really much to talk about outside of the Titanic level, which I'm wondering on whether or not I'll show off. I think I might do it as a bonus video, maybe, but I don't know. But again, outside of the obvious things, you know, outside of there's a slight lighting change in the N64 version, and the draw distance is obviously much closer to Gex. Then the visuals are toned down a little bit. But outside, well, that and even the voice clips are cut down significantly, so there's just the amount of understandable differences you'd see in any N64 port of a PlayStation 1 game. Although, that being said, I think the only PS1 game I can think of that never really had that significant of a change, I think, was Resident Evil 2, which actually had itself more or less intact, with I think only a couple of minor things removed. But in a general sense, I think Resident Evil 2 was probably one of the only games that was left relatively untouched when porting it from the PlayStation up to the Nintendo 64. That was a voice clip supposed to play there? Fuck it, who cares? Thankfully, I think there's only 2 missions and then we can finally get out of this dump. Ouch! Oh, Jesus. Owies. Fuck, man, there's just... Okay, let's see, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? I suppose I'll probably talk television shows. I don't really... Actually, now that I think about it, I don't really watch TV that much anymore. I'm trying to remember the last... No, I don't really watch TV. I mean, like, there's a lot of people that go on about, like, fucking Netflix series and shit like that, but for me, it's been... honestly, something I don't give a fuck about. I mean, I think the last television show I think I honestly consider watching anymore is either... Well, it was Torchwood back when it was on, and I suppose Doctor Who is really the only television show I really watch anymore, so... I just don't find anything else entertaining. I suppose anime could possibly count as television shows as well, but... there's streaming services and, like, there's secret sexy torrents for that shit now, so... I don't know. Television just hasn't been a very big factor into my life, like, at all, in the past few years, really. And I suppose, well, since I was going on a bit of an anime tangent anyway, we're going back to a level aesthetic that I think is probably a little bit more pleasing to the eyes, and one that is significantly less boring. Toon TV, the second and final tier of these emissions, actually. That's another thing I don't really watch anymore, cartoons, which again, sounds more like a no-shit thing than it really would be. Well, I suppose, outside of the 2010s when it kind of became acceptable for a lot of older audiences to enjoy the art form in, well, general sense. I say that, but again, I think the 90s also kind of de-established that with the animation age of Gecko, I think, if that's the correct term. Now, what you're seeing right here is the attempts to sequence break, so I'm going to take a little break, edit a little bit, and I'll see you in a bit. And success! We have launched ourselves over here, and now I will show you the silver remote, which is hidden right behind this castle that's suspended in the air. I don't know, television physics. Yeah, I think this is actually one of the ones that the ending credits show you, or at the very least it's the one that I remember the most. Anyway, the first tier of missions is actually relatively quick to complete. You just gotta whack this firework and head over. The second tier of this mission is actually a little bit longer and involves a lot more platforming and is slightly more tedious to get through, but nonetheless, pretty quick to clear out. There was actually a complete other pathway that you were supposed to take in order to complete it, but the effect is still relatively the same either way you go about it. The only difference is you can just use the dominoes to sequence break. No, I got the reruns. But we'll be getting to that little mission next time. In the next part, I believe. Loading, we are still loading. All on my loading. All on my loading. And now it's just another one of our generic get to the television missions. Although, to be entirely fair, outside of the little platforming sequence that's in this area in particular, there is a little area that I do think is actually quite fun once you get past all the bullshit. Not to say that this level is particularly difficult or anything, it's just, oh, rather tedious. And no, not for the fact that you have items falling on you in this green hill zone looking pattern. And the reason I call it tedious is mostly because it has you moving these toy blocks, which, I don't know. And they tend to reset after a little bit if you leave them alone for too long, so it's just bleh. Ow! My head. I think those blocks infinitely respawn as well. Damn. Out of commentary already. And I swear to god, Jak 2 ripped off this sequence, because there was this little... bloody section in the precursor... Was it the precursor? I think it was Haven Forest, actually. Oh, you had to escape from these falling rocks, and it came from Gecko, surprisingly. Bees. My god. And for me, I'd say this is probably the most tedious section, because you get a platform off these things and also use the blocks, I believe, as well. It's just a lot of platforming, and again, it's supposed to be doing its job in the sense of, you know, being a challenge and all that, but, I don't know, it's just a lot of playing the waiting game. Now we play the waiting game. So, to pass the time, I suppose I could probably go back on that tangent about how I don't watch cartoons anymore. Which I just don't have the interest in, I'm sorry. It's either anime or bust for me, apparently, because I've become so stunted in my development that I've become Archon, and I believe that I'm helping the government in creating peace giant robot thingies. That's not Metal Gear tangents for one day. The fact of the matter is I don't watch television or cartoons anymore, which is depressing. Well, I suppose not really depressing. I suppose I'm probably losing my faith in entertainment in general, I suppose, since I'm mostly relegating on video games that are 20 years out of date by this point, and it pains me to say that. Oh dear. But then again, that's why I create reviews and try to entertain people, to fulfill my meaningless existence. That's enough about this nihilistic commentary that's just there to fill up the time, because this section is actually pretty fun. That is, if you don't fall off. Now, what you're supposed to be doing is you could probably... Well, I don't think you really could see it, but within that little block of ice, which is somehow still not melting, because apparently things just don't work that way, you're supposed to run through a block of ice, which then leads you to a boat, which actually has a little Popeye the Sailor Man jingle. And that takes you to the next part of the level. Which I believe is also how you're supposed to be getting to the little target area, which, you know, we sequence broke to the last couple of minutes, I should say. And then, once you do that, jobs are good'n, and it's starting to rain again, even though this is supposed to be uploaded in the spring. Can you tell when this was commentated over? Yeah, I suppose that's probably something I can do to pass the time. This is being commentated over in the winter, more specifically in July, because I have a certain game that I want to commentate over during the summer, and of course it's the kind of game that I think is probably the only reason that anybody ever actually comes to this channel for, because apparently the blue hedgehog will not leave me. I'm the curse of my own hubris, I suppose, but anyway, it's the reason why people care, and that's all I can really ask for. I don't really know why, but this just kind of reminds me of, like, a fucking Three Stooges act. I don't know why, and it probably doesn't even reminisce with any of their comic material, but such is life, I suppose. Yep. I suppose getting the collectibles is probably the easiest to do in this level, since there's just so many ways you can harvest collectibles, but in that sense, we've already got most of what we need, I believe. Yep, third tier we're on now, so now what we've got to do is just... I think this time we take a dive down the well. Oh no, we're supposed to go up there and take the long way around, I think. Fuck, man, I need something else to talk about. Shit. Well, I suppose I could probably divulge into cartoons and shit that I did watch as a kid. Which, surprisingly, wasn't really, like a lot of the generically cartoonish. Like, I think when I was young, like, the stuff that I was mostly into watching was, like, a lot of the home-produced live-action stuff that was made in Australia. Like, Thunderstone, and Spellbinder, and Jeopardy was more of a British show, well, Scottish show I should say, that was filmed in Australia, but whatever, I had my jollies watching it. Yeah, the Almafud guys don't give you anything, so feel free to kill them as Daffy Duck. Or the Nostalgia Critic, as he was based on. By the way, the Nostalgia Critic's turning 10 years old this year, which fucking baffles me, man. Like, I mean, it's kind of weird to say, like, all this internet shit has, like, become part of it. Like, people can say that they, like, grew up with it and stuff, man, and that's just, like, scary. In fact, do I narcissistically dare to dream that at some stage somebody will grow up saying that they grew up watching Skully reviews, or watching these commentaries? Yeah, possibly. I mean, fuck man, I remember in 2009 when I discovered, you know, Shitcase Cinema and Scottish Duck, and all those kinds of channels, and they have, like, so many memories with me, man, and it's just, like, fucking surreal. I don't know, I mean, I think realistically speaking, if I was to project into the future, I don't think anybody would really say that they grew up watching my videos and shit, but, you know, it's a comforting thought to say that, you know, at the very least some people had some fond memories of, you know, some shit that you were doing at a certain point in time. Or at the very least, that's part of the reason why, you know, I like doing what I do. I just like entertaining people, because if it makes their life a little easier, I'm fucking humbled and fine with that. Oh well, but anyway, enough wistful memories. I'm Skully, keeping new metal, and next time on Gex 3D, enter the Gecko. Oh, I gotta go to the toilet because I got the reruns!
Nice try, big boy.